Welcome to Just Stories. We hope you enjoy the story. The Battle for Supremacy, the Second Maratha War, by Just Stories. Chapter 1, The Road to War. Welcome to the first chapter of the Battle for Supremacy, the Second Maratha War. In this chapter, we will delve into the complex political and economic factors that led to the outbreak of the Second Maratha War. The British East India Company had been expanding its territory in India for several decades, and by the turn of the 19th century, it had become one of the dominant powers in the region. Meanwhile, the Maratha Confederacy, a loose alliance of Indian states, was struggling to maintain its hold on power amidst internal divisions and external pressures. One of the key figures in stoking tensions between the British and the Marathas was Governor-General Richard Wellesley, who had a vision of expanding British control over India. Wellesley saw the Maratha Confederacy as a major obstacle to this goal, and he began taking steps to weaken and subjugate the Maratha states. In 1802, tensions came to a head when the Peshwa Baji Rao II, the de facto leader of the Maratha Confederacy, signed a treaty with the British East India Company that ceded territory and granted trading rights to the British. This move was deeply unpopular among many Maratha leaders, who saw it as a betrayal of their sovereignty and a threat to their power. One of the most vocal critics of the treaty was Yashwantarao Holkar, the ruler of the state of Indore and a key player in the Maratha Confederacy. Holkar saw the treaty as a direct challenge to his authority, and he began rallying other Maratha leaders to his cause. At the same time, Wellesley was pushing for further expansion of British control over India. He saw the Maratha states as ripe for conquest, and he began mobilizing British forces in preparation for a potential war. In August 1803, Holkar and his allies launched an attack on British forces stationed in the city of Pune, the capital of the Peshwa's territories. This marked the beginning of the Second Maratha War, which would last for 2 years and have far-reaching consequences for India and the world. In conclusion, the road to war in the Second Maratha War was a complex and multifaceted one, involving political maneuvering, economic pressures, and competing visions of power and sovereignty. Governor-General Richard Wellesley's ambitions for British expansion clashed with the Maratha Confederacy's desire to maintain its independence, setting the stage for a conflict that would shape the course of Indian history for decades to come. Chapter 2, The Battle of Assaye. Welcome to the second chapter of the Battle for Supremacy, the Second Maratha War. In this chapter, we will explore one of the most significant engagements of the Second Maratha War, the Battle of Assaye. The Battle of Assay took place on September 23, 1803, and was fought between British and Maratha forces in central India. The British were led by Major General Arthur Wellesley, the younger brother of Governor-General Richard Wellesley, while the Marathas were led by the Bhosle and Scindia factions. The battle began early in the morning, with the Maratha forces launching a surprise attack on the British camp. However, Wellesley was prepared for the assault and had deployed his troops strategically to defend against the Maratha cavalry charges. The fighting was fierce and brutal, with both sides sustaining heavy casualties. The Marathas had a numerical advantage, with around 50,000 soldiers compared to the British force of 5,000, but the British were better equipped and better trained. The key turning point in the battle came when the Maratha cavalry charged straight into the teeth of the British lines, exposing themselves to withering musket fire. The British were able to repel the charge and then counterattack, driving the Maratha forces back and inflicting heavy losses. After several hours of intense fighting, the British emerged victorious. The Marathas suffered around 8,000 casualties, while the British lost around 1,500 soldiers. The battle was a significant victory for the British, as it effectively ended the threat of a Maratha invasion of British-held territories. The Battle of Assaye was notable for several reasons. Firstly, it demonstrated the effectiveness of the British military tactics and training, which enabled them to overcome a much larger enemy force. Secondly, it highlighted the vulnerabilities of the Maratha cavalry, which were exposed to the British musket fire. Finally, it cemented Arthur Wellesley's reputation as a skilled military commander, paving the way for his later successes in India and Europe. In conclusion, the Battle of Assaye was a pivotal moment in the Second Maratha War. The British victory at Assaye was a major setback for the Marathas, and it helped to establish British dominance in India for decades to come. The battle also demonstrated the importance of military strategy and training, as well as the deadly effectiveness of musket fire against cavalry charges. Chapter 3: The Siege of Bardapur. Welcome to the third chapter of the Battle for Supremacy, the Second Maratha War. In this chapter, we will explore one of the most significant and longest battles of the Second Maratha War, the Siege of Bardapur. Bardapur was a powerful fortress located in what is now the state of Rajasthan, India. The city was ruled by a Jat king named Maharaja Suraj Mal, who was fiercely independent and had refused to sign treaties with the British East India Company. In December 1804, a British force of around 24,000 soldiers, led by General Gerard Lake, began the siege of Bardapur. The fortress was heavily fortified, with thick walls, moats, and several layers of defenses, making it a formidable target. The siege lasted for several months, with both sides sustaining heavy casualties. The British had brought in large numbers of troops and artillery, but the defenders of Bardapur were well organized and fiercely determined to resist. One of the most notable aspects of the siege was the use of a large number of war elephants by both sides. The British had brought several trained elephants to the battle, using them to carry artillery and troops across the moats and breach the walls. However, the defenders of Bardapur were also skilled in the use of elephants, and they used them to charge the British lines and disrupt their formations. Despite the challenges, the British were able to make steady progress in the siege. They breached the outer walls of the fortress and began to make inroads into the inner defenses. However, the defenders of Bardapur were not easily defeated, and they continued to resist fiercely. In February 1805, the British finally breached the inner walls of the fortress, and Maharaja Suraj Mal was forced to surrender. The siege had lasted for over 3 months and had resulted in heavy losses for both sides. The Siege of Bardapur was a significant event in the Second Maratha War, as it marked a major victory for the British and helped to further consolidate their control over India. It also highlighted the importance of military technology and tactics in siege warfare, as both sides made use of advanced weaponry and innovative strategies to gain the upper hand. In conclusion, the Siege of Bardapur was a grueling and protracted battle that tested the resolve and skill of both the British and the defenders of Bardapur. Despite the challenges, the British were ultimately able to emerge victorious, demonstrating the effectiveness of their military strategy and technology. The battle remains a key moment in the history of the Second Maratha War and a testament to the enduring legacy of Indian military prowess. Chapter 4: The Treaty of Sergio. Welcome to the fourth chapter of the Battle for Supremacy, the Second Maratha War. In this chapter, we will explore the end of the war and the Treaty of Sergio. After several years of fighting, the British East India Company and the Maratha Confederacy were both ready to bring the Second Maratha War to a close. In September 1805, they signed the Treaty of Sergio, which marked the end of the conflict. The treaty was signed by representatives of the British and the Maratha Confederacy, including Governor-General Lord Cornwallis and the Peshwa Baji Rao II. The treaty contained several key provisions, including the cession of territory to the British, the recognition of British control over certain areas of India, and the payment of reparations by the Maratha Confederacy. One of the most significant provisions of the treaty was the formal recognition of British control over the city of Delhi, which had previously been contested between the British and the Marathas. The treaty also granted the British the right to station troops in several key locations throughout India, cementing their military dominance in the region. However, the treaty was not without controversy. Many Maratha leaders felt that they had been forced to accept unfavorable terms, and there was widespread discontent over the loss of territory and control to the British. Some Maratha leaders, such as Yeshwantarao Holkar, refused to sign the treaty and continued to resist British rule in India. The Treaty of Sergio was a significant moment in the history of British colonialism in India. It marked the formalization of British control over large parts of India and helped to pave the way for further expansion of British power in the region. It also had important implications for the Maratha Confederacy, which had suffered a significant defeat and lost much of its territory and influence. In conclusion, the Treaty of Sergio was a pivotal moment in the Second Maratha War, marking the end of a long and brutal conflict and the formalization of British control over India. While the treaty was a significant victory for the British, it also highlighted the deep divisions and tensions that existed between the British and the Marathas, setting the stage for further conflict and resistance in the years to come. Chapter 5: Legacy and Consequences. Welcome to the fifth and final chapter of the Battle for Supremacy, the Second Maratha War. In this chapter, we will explore the legacy and consequences of the war, both for India and for the wider world. The Second Maratha War had far-reaching implications for India, as it marked the beginning of a new phase of British colonialism in the region. The British East India Company had already established a significant presence in India by the turn of the 19th century, but the Second Maratha War helped to solidify British control over large parts of the subcontinent. One of the most significant legacies of the war was the formalization of British control over key regions of India, including the cities of Delhi, Agra, and Kanpur. The British were also granted the right to station troops in several other locations throughout India, giving them a significant military presence in the region. The war also had important implications for the Maratha Confederacy, which had suffered a significant defeat and lost much of its territory and influence. The internal divisions within the Maratha states were further exacerbated by the war, and the Confederacy would never again be a significant force in Indian politics. Beyond India, the Second Maratha War had broader implications for the balance of power in the world. The British East India Company had already established itself as a major player in global politics, but the victory in the Second Maratha War helped to further cement British dominance in the region and solidify their status as a global superpower. The war also had important implications for the future of British imperialism. The British victory in India helped to establish a template for future imperial conquests, with British forces using a combination of military might, diplomacy, and economic pressure to subjugate other regions and territories. However, the war was not without controversy and resistance. Many Indians, including some of the Maratha leaders who had fought against the British, continued to resist British colonialism in the years and decades that followed. The legacy of the Second Maratha War can still be felt in India today, as the country continues to grapple with the legacy of colonialism and its impact on Indian society and culture. In conclusion, the Second Maratha War was a pivotal moment in the history of India and the world. The war marked the beginning of a new phase of British colonialism in India, and it helped to cement British dominance in the region and establish the country as a global superpower. However, the war was also marked by controversy, resistance, and ongoing tensions between the British and the Indian people. The legacy of the war continues to shape the course of Indian history and politics to this day. Thank you for watching our story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss out on our next video.